I want to turn and talk to now what's happening. I try not to talk about the impeachment every single day because it could consume every show I do every day. But I do want to turn and talk about the impeachment today, and I use the term impeachment treachery. And it's really important to understand several different aspects of this are going on in Washington. You likely know that the president, was impeached, 2 articles of impeachment in the House. Now the Senate is having their trial. And what's happening right now in the Senate, the president's lawyers are wrapping up their arguments today. So you have the House managers presented their case. Now the president's lawyers have presented their defense. And then apparently tomorrow we'll turn to questioning by the senators. So the senators then get to, probe and find out whatever they want to ask they're allowed to do. And then after that, there's going to be a vote on whether or not to call witnesses. I do mean when I use the word treachery about John Bolton. He is President Trump's former national security advisor, NSA advisor. So he was a trusted, top level of the entire country, trusted official by the Trump administration, a person in whom President Trump had to confide in a variety of contexts on all sorts of issues, because that's why you have high-level advisors when you're the president. You actually need to be able to tell them precisely what you think, what your concerns are, to talk out the hard issues, to get the advice, opinions from these people about the hard issues that you're facing as a country. So John Bolton was fired by President Trump, and obviously no one likes to be fired. John Bolton has now written a book, and this book is not yet out, but John Bolton has written a book in which he is backing up the Democrat view on this impeachment question related to the president's conversation with Ukrainian President Zelensky. Bolton is floating stories in this book that make it sound like President Trump really did put a quid pro quo, or really did withhold aid to the Ukrainian country for the explicit purpose of, trying to force them, arm twist them into investigating the Burisma, Biden, money laundering, whole corrupt organization that was happening in the Ukraine in 2016 when Joe Biden was still vice president. His son, Hunter Biden, sat on the board of Burisma, making a mountain of money for doing nothing and knowing nothing. But Bolton is helping the Democrats. So the first point I want to make clear before we get to all the other details is this, and I think I've said this in a show before, I've definitely said it in social media, I've said it in speeches. I think it's a mistake for President Trump's defense team to concede the point that if there was anything that can be characterized as a quid pro quo, then indeed Trump did something wrong and could be in big trouble. I don't think the president's defense team should be saying that or implying that or conceding that. What President Trump was looking into was actual, known, apparent State Department involvement, corruption with Burisma, with NGOs involved, funded by the American taxpayer through our State Department, the then vice president of our country and his adult son, other people connected to high-level people in Washington. It was corruption, at the appearance of corruption, which we all have heard. I'm not going to go over it again, but we've all heard that. We heard Joe Biden announce it, not just begrudgingly admit it, bragging about what he did in 2016 in the Ukraine, telling him, you're going to fire this prosecutor looking into my son's company, or we're withholding $1 billion of aid. The idea that the problem I have before I get into all the other details for today is President Trump's legal team should not be even by implication agreeing that if somebody like Bolton or any of these other characters running around trying to undermine the president, if any of them can make it sound like the president even momentarily hesitated on releasing the aid or delayed it for a few days, even if he didn't communicate with them as to why, that anything like that, if what President Trump was thinking was that he was withholding aid, trying to force them to look into this case. And this is that therefore he, President Trump, is guilty of one of the impeachment charges or is guilty of some other impeachable offense, because you can't do quid pro quo. You can. There's not a constitutional provision that says quid pro quo is a bad thing. We do aid all the time to other countries saying, we're going to hold back aid until you, whatever, stop hassling the Christians, stop persecuting Christians, stop doing this, stop doing that. You can do that. But what the nub of this is that people who are critical of President Trump want to characterize any withholding of money as an attempt by the president to interfere in the 2020 elections to hurt Joe Biden's chances of winning. But the president would have had a valid reason to go after, to want to have the Ukrainians look into whatever all that was happening. And there's a lot known, we've talked about in the show in depth, but a lot known already with NGOs and State Department and Burisma and the money flowing to the Ukraine and the money laundering. I mean, there was a lot already known. So President Trump's critics are saying that if they can prove it crossed his mind that one thing might be if he pressured them to look into this and investigate Burisma, that it might hurt Biden's election chances, that's an impeachable offense. The fact is, a responsible president of our country should be looking into whether or not there was corruption not yet exposed, especially with American taxpayer dollars involved, corruption not yet exposed, corruption not yet investigated, involving Burisma, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden. And the fact that Joe Biden chose to run for president does not all of a sudden make it illegitimate for President Trump to look into this situation. I really want you I want that point to sink in. The Democrats are arguing that because Biden chose to run for president, all of his conduct in 2016 can't be talked about, can't be looked into, cannot even be discussed, because it's irrelevant because he's a candidate. So anything he did, anything President Trump did to look into it, constitutes interference in 2020 elections, instead of constitutes the duty of the of the President of the United States to look into corruption that included the previous administration in this country and included taxpayer dollars. President Trump was permitted to require, ask, inquire, encourage the Ukrainian government to look into corruption involving the previous presidency, the previous administration, and involving Burisma and involving Biden. He's entitled to ask about it. And somehow, because Joe Biden is now a candidate, President Trump did not lose that right, not just right for President Trump to look into, obligation to look into it. That did not go away. And so in the Senate defense, when you see the president's lawyers presenting a defense in the Senate, they've been talking about the corruption and Burisma and Biden. And so the Democrats trying to say, you can't talk about that. It's irrelevant. Doesn't matter what it doesn't matter what it doesn't matter. It only matters this one conversation, and everything else we can pull out of the woodwork to make the allegation that we can prove that President Trump was talking about the Ukrainian aid and Biden because in the back of his head he was thinking, maybe I can cause the 2020 elections to go against Biden. This is the Democrat position. You have to be clear on the Republican side. You've got to be clear and understand President Trump had every right to look into that and to ask the Ukrainians to look into it, to say he needed to do it. This is the craziest impeachment idea there has been. So, understanding that point, that I think the president's lawyers need to stop fussing about whether or not somebody can come up with some alleged statement made at some point by somebody in the White House that maybe made it sound like Trump thought maybe if Ukrainians weren't willing to investigate, maybe we should hold aid back. Stop worrying about that. Stop worrying about that. When you're the president, you can look into corruption involving the previous administration, involving taxpayer dollars. You can ask Ukrainians to do it, and you don't lose that right to do it just because the person involved in that corruption, Joe Biden, is now a candidate for president. Now I want to get the rest of things and get on with what Bolton is doing. So Bolton is upset and unhappy and a big ego guy because he was let go. He's no longer the national security advisor to President Trump. So he's got a book. And in this book, he is trying to take the side of the Democrats. Now, a couple of things about this really matter. Number one, there was a leak of some of the content of this book that is not out yet. The New York Times shockingly got this story, got a leak, ran some stuff talking about how bad that Bolton's book is really going to bolster the Democrats' case. So number one, a leak. We don't, Bolton is of course saying, I don't know who did that. Not me, not my team. I don't know. No one leaked it. It just like magically appeared one day in the New York Times headquarters, and no one leaked it. I'm joking. Obviously, someone leaked it. Number two. In what was leaked, there were comments that were accusatory of the of conversations, trying to characterize conversations that happened in the Department of Justice, in which they were claiming certain statements that were made by, allegedly made by the Attorney General or others that are being recounted in this book, kind of like saying, look, right here, we got the proof. We have the Attorney General having been part of this. So Attorney General's office, the Department of Justice is has already put a statement out denying what Bolton is saying happened in some conversations. See, Bolton's out there on his own, writing a book, trying to lay blame at the feet of President Trump, trying to call in, saying, see, at the Department of Justice, this happened. DOJ is totally denying it, denying the Times report based on Bolton's new book, specifically denying a meeting between the former National Security Advisor and Attorney General William Barr about Trump's relationships with world leaders. Bolton, the nefarious, is trying to rope in Barr and claim somehow Barr was kind of privy to what Trump was doing and it wasn't right. Barr is saying no deal, no dice, not true. In addition, because what the NSA does is so super secret, so confidential, the NSA actually has a person who is responsible for deciding what people are allowed to say, what they're allowed to put out there after they're finished with their service. I mean, you can't serve in the NSA and then go into private life and write a book and tell everything that you heard the whole time you're in the NSA. But if you wrote this in a fiction, people would say, oh, that would never happen. In the NSA, the person with responsibility to review the contents of things that former NSA officials want to publish publicly, the person in charge of deciding, is anything this former NSA person that they're wanting to put in a book, is any of it harmful to us? Should we let this out or not? The person who has that job has a last name of Vindman, Vindman. And I want you to take a second and think about where you heard the name Vindman before. Vindman has a brother, has an actual twin brother. Vindman was one of the people, he was a Ukraine desk guy. They are, in fact, Ukrainian by background. Vindman, NSA guy, was one of the people who testified for the Democrats in the House impeachment trial. And he's very high level connection to the Ukrainians. He was a guy who testified against Trump. He was a guy who was, when he was finished speaking, many people were thinking, he kind of sounds like he's been talking to high level officials in the Ukraine out of school, out of his role in ways he shouldn't be doing. So that Vindman has a brother, and I believe it's a twin brother, whose job it is to vet what former NSA officials can put in books or articles or anything public when they leave. And that Vindman, the twin of Vindman, the witness against President Trump, that's the guy who reviewed the content of Bolton's book and has apparently given it the green light. I mean, people, you have to understand, this is the left in this country believing anything goes, anything is justified to get this president. So the former NSA advisor can spill the beans on all sorts of things, which, the DOJ says he's not even telling the truth. but he can put this out there to get Trump and someone who's on a position, in the NSA, who's the ethics lawyer for the NSA. That guy can authorize the former NSA director to write a book to accuse President Trump of doing what the Democrats said he did, and which he's denying. I mean, you're okay, I'm stuttering. You're left like speechless. How could this be? And no one's saying, wait a minute, how does he still have a job? How does either Vindman still have a job in the NSA? I mean, the idea that these two brothers, Ukrainians, with high-level connections to Ukrainian high-level officials, are part of the effort to help John Bolton bring down President Trump. It is simply mind-blowing. But there you have it. Word is out there. And now, because Bolton's words are out there, kind of making an accusation, Bolton's been clamoring to testify. Yeah, I'll testify. And it is, apparently, when the House impeachment hearing was happening, it was a decision the House managers decided not to pursue. Obviously, President Trump can assert executive privilege over having his own NSA advisor. It'd be like, any other privilege recognized in law. It's like the marital privilege or the attorney-client privilege. The privilege exists to protect communications, to encourage openness. The president has executive privilege. He can say, my NSA guy, I can't trust, I can't have conversations I can trust with my NSA guy if he can go testify. So Trump apparently said, no on the executive privilege with respect to Bolton. The House didn't have the backbone, if they really wanted his testimony, to pursue it, to go to court. Either didn't have the backbone, didn't want to take the time. They didn't pursue Bolton's testimony in the House impeachment. So now we're over in the Senate, and the big question is, can the Senate call witnesses that the House did not call? And so because of this, book by Bolton, now you've got the two reliably unreliable Republican senators just persistently just reliably unreliable. Susan Collins of Maine and Mitt Romney of Utah, alleged Republicans, both have now said, because of what we're gleaning from what Bolton's going to say in his book, now we're going to vote to have John Bolton come as a witness to this Senate impeachment trial. And I'm going to tell you, Romney especially, who is I can't, it's not even that he's just more he is very establishment, very, country club, wealthy, chin in the air, full of himself, intellectual, smug, superior. But he's not even just that. He's vindictive. He does not like President Trump. He wants to hurt him. So you have Romney, Senator Romney, now saying, yes, on Bolton as a witness, think we're going to have to call him, and will not commit that he would then also agree with the calling of the witnesses that the Republicans say, well, if the Democrats are going to bring witnesses, then we're bringing in the whistleblower, Eric Ciaramella. We're bringing in Schiff, the House manager who led this whole thing, and Schiff, whose staff was all mixed up with the whistleblower. And there are also other Republican senators who are saying, if we got to have Bolton, we're going to have the whistleblower, Schiff. We're going to have at least Hunter Biden, maybe Joe Biden. There's a long list of people that the Republicans are going to say, if you want Bolton, we get all these. Now, what we need now more than anything is the backbone of Mitch McConnell, backbone of the Republicans in the Senate, just saying, no way that you Democrats get Bolton and we'll then drop it. No way. I still think the best outcome, my view, even though I'd love to have all of it on the front pages, all of it spilled out there for America to see, I still think the best outcome for America would be get enough Republicans to vote no, to vote on acquit, to vote no on witnesses, to move to the vote, to move to acquit the president and move on, get this gone. That is my opinion. I'm going to tell you, I've heard people say, well, gee, then you're going to have the Democrats arguing, well, the Republicans just happen to have the majority. They could end this impeachment, but America never got to see the truth. And this was so unfair. We had so many things America should have known, and the Republicans just protected their guy, protected their president, and now they look really bad. But I got to tell you, folks, Republicans, in a way, they can't win either way. Yes, if the Republicans move to acquit, as they need to do, you're going to have the Democrats claiming, well, yeah, only because Republicans stepped up and, voted straight party and protected their president, that's why, the president was acquitted. He wasn't acquitted because he was innocent. He was acquitted because Republicans had the majority. But understand this. If the Republicans and Democrats came to an agreement on witnesses in the Senate trial, and so you had Bolton, who's obviously chomping at the bit to destroy President Trump, and the Democrats can't wait to let him do that. You're going to have all of what he has to say out there. You're going to have Republicans trying to counter it to figure out, how do we refute it? How do we prove he's lying? How do we prove he's wrong? How do we prove he didn't know what he's talking about? And you're going to have all sorts of other witnesses, which even though you might think the other witnesses are there to help President Trump, you're going to have witness after witness after witness, and then testimony about conversations and statements and who heard what and when was it heard and who heard it and who's lying about what was heard. And it will keep the story spinning in the media. It will raise more questions than it will ever answer. There will never be a point, mark my words, there will never be a point while President Trump sits in the White House, this term or next term, there will never be a point that the Democrats in this country concede that there was nothing wrong with the Trump-Ukrainian phone call, that there was no impeachable offense committed by the president. The Democrats will never even concede that there wasn't Trump-Russia collusion after spending millions of dollars. The point is, the Democrats will never concede and act like grown-ups. They will never accept the verdict. They will never accept the truth. They will fight and fight and fight, and all you do with a trial strung out is gives them more pieces of evidence, more arguments, more tidbits, more, investigation needed. Now that we know this, now we got to know this. It will never, ever end. So my vote, if I were a senator, the Senate, I get to ask questions and vote to acquit, get it off the table, because you have to understand, dealing with the Democrat Party in Washington at this time is like dealing with terrorists. I am not exaggerating. It's like dealing with terrorists. They will never surrender. They will never capitulate. They will never find compromise. They will never stop yammering and hammering. In fact, even during the House managers presenting their case in the Senate, you had, I think it was Nadler, one of them, I think it was Nadler, brought up again Trump-Russia collusion and the whole collusion Mueller thing, even though, as we all know, no matter how long they investigate and how much money Mueller spent and how many hours of depositions and how many lawyers he hired and how many people he talked to, they found nothing. But this is an example of what I mean. Nadler, the Dems will never drop this, ever, ever drop this. So you can't win by agreeing to be reasonable, by agreeing to call witnesses, by agreeing to hear both sides. The Republicans can't win. The only thing terrorists understand is brute power. Islamic jihadist terrorists only understand brute force. The Democrats in Washington only understand shut it down, move on, and then please let us have a Republican majority in the U.S. House and put all this to bed, because please understand, if President Trump is not impeached, if he stays in office through this election cycle, if he's reelected, this will continue. The effort to impeach him and destroy him will continue the entire time he is president, until finally we have a majority in the House and the Senate and some people with backbone to say, you're done attacking him.